Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Art of MMA. I am Mike Ginn. I'm joined as always by my co-host. I'm talking about Brandon the Mechanic Cuttino. Brandon, how you feeling today?
Man, I'm feeling good, man. Good to be back.
Man,
more fights coming.
Yeah, we finally got a fight card in last weekend. Max looked amazing. We got some other stuff to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Khabib news. We're going to talk about the Diaz brothers. Of course, we're going to talk about Max Holloway, Calvin Kattar. You can call UFC on ABC1. You can call UFC Fight Island 7. For our record-keeping purposes, we'll call it UFC Fight Island 7. We're going to talk about tomorrow's UFC Fight Island 8, which is going to feature Mike Chiesa and Neil Magny. And then we're also going to talk about the big card this weekend. Of course, Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier. We kind of talked about it in length, but UFC 257 is finally here and about to take place. So we'll get to all that. But like I said, first, let's talk about a little bit of news. You know, we always like to joke. How do you know a promoter's lying? It's like a lawyer, right? He's moving his lips.
Yep.
Dana White met this week with Khabib, and all he really came out of that was he couldn't convince Khabib to come back. You know, he tried it. He tried. He's been talking forever about wanting Khabib to come back and go for 30-0. Mainly because, you know, in his heart of hearts, Dana's want Khabib and Conor too. Even when he's been talking about who's next for the lightweight title, he's been just brushing over the fact that Dustin Poirier is even in this fight. Which we're going to totally ignore the fact that the fight is still at 170. But then you sit there, he comes out. It's like Khabib said Oliveira looked really good. And he was impressed with him. And he wants to see what happens this weekend. And if anybody impresses him, maybe this summer you see Khabib versus one of them. So basically, he said nothing. He said he couldn't convince Khabib to come back, but he convinced him to keep his mind open, right?
Yep.
Like, let me ask you this. A, do you think that Khabib will fight again? And then B, do you think it'll be in 2021?
Do I think he'll fight again? I really want to say no, because I want to say he wants to keep his word to his mom, where he told where she wanted him to stop. And everybody knows if you really know Khabib, man, he's a man of his word. He keeps his word to his family. Like, to me, the only way he would come back is if his mom gave him her blessing. So I don't know how that would go.
Honestly, I think if they're even having a talk about it, she's probably giving him her blessing. But I agree with you. He's always been very principled. And even if it's not to his benefit, he's always been like, if I said this is what I'm going to do. And even when DC said on air, like, yeah, he talked to Khabib this weekend, but they didn't even talk about the fact that he might come back because he knew better to even ask him. Like, he's already said what he said. So I don't see he's coming back. I don't think he's coming back. I think it's ironic that they said on air that Khabib is, like, one thing he does not want to do is hold up the division.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't even say that unless he was thinking about not coming back. I think Dana's the one holding up the division. I think the last thing they want to do is have another interim situation like they did with Tony Ferguson and Khabib a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And obviously, Conor and Dustin aren't even fighting at 155. They're fighting at 170, so you can't make that an interim title belt. And it was too late in the game to get them to go to 155, I believe. I think somebody said that.
Yeah, I really want to say, I think, kind of listening to what Dana was saying, because he mentioned the main event, but then he also mentioned the co-main event. And if you're really looking at it, to me, it's like Khabib has no interest in fighting Conor McGregor. He said it several times. His agent, Ali said it several times. It's like, there's no point. The dude doesn't fight anyway. He's done nothing to earn another shot. And it's like, well, you just fought Dustin. Yeah, he got some wins, but you don't want to really run that back. To me, I think this is either he gives it to Charles Oliveira, who we all believe deserves it, but I think the money fight that they're trying to make is Michael Chandler, because Chandler's new. He's someone that hasn't been in the UFC. I think that's the only person out of those 4 or 5 that he would want to fight.
I just don't think Khabib cares about him. I don't think Khabib could care less about Michael Chandler. In fact, when he came in to weigh in, like, for the Khabib and Gaethje fight, Khabib was like, go home. Because if the Gaethje fight don't happen, I'm not fighting you.
Yeah.
He told him to go home. And of course, Chandler's doing what he's told by Dana. He's brand new to the promotion. He's not trying to rock the boat. I mean, I would argue that Cowboy Cerrone, even though he's on his downside, Conor destroyed him last year, about a year ago. And
it was a year ago today, actually.
Yeah, yesterday, yeah. And the only loss Conor has in the UFC, basically, Nate Diaz, which was at 170, it wasn't at 155, and Khabib. And that was after, in the Khabib fight, basically was only a non-title fight for Conor. I mean, he was fighting for the title, but the only reason he wasn't the champion is because he went off to fight Floyd Mayweather and he vacated the belt he won from Eddie Alvarez.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can say he hasn't earned another shot, but he hasn't, I don't even know the way to properly say this, he hasn't unearned a shot either, and dollars make sense in this business, especially with Dana. And he can be mad at Conor for wanting to retire like 14 times via Twitter. But at the end of the day, the guy is the number one box office draw. Both him and Khabib are international superstars. And while Conor definitely gassed in the second or third round of that fight, he was giving Khabib a fit in the first round. And it was still going back and forth until Khabib just started smothering him. And then by the fourth round, it was just over. You can see Conor just couldn't even – he had more energy after the fight than he had during the fight. Khabib obviously jumping out of the cage and that whole mess, that whole like trying to copy the NBA with the whole Indiana-Detroit brawl. They tried to copy that. I think Dana's like got a hard on trying to get Conor Khabib too. I think Khabib just doesn't care about that. So we'll see what happens. In other news right now, we're talking about Francis Ngannou, Stipe finally have a date. It's going to be on March 27th. Going to be for the UFC 260 card. UFC is going to have 2 pay-per-views now in March. So that should definitely be interesting. The other big fight on that card, which after this last weekend, a lot of people will be paying attention to, Alexander Volkanovski versus T-City Brian Ortega. They've announced a couple other fights on that card, but I'm not really taking any of them too seriously because it's still 3 months away. And every time we try to get our minds made up on a card nowadays, the old wrestling verbiage, card subject to change. So I'm not even going to, Johnny Walker, Jimmy Crute would be cool. Not really too overly invested into that one right now. That could be moved probably to a couple different cards. And Bukowskis and Michael, I don't even know how to say his name. Oleg Zuzak. I've seen him fight. I'm sorry I'm butchering his name, but he's actually, a former independent champion too, but he's lost to St. Crew. He's lost to Jimmy Crute. So not really super excited about that fight either. But we'll see what happens as always. The other news kind of making its rounds. Everybody's favorite, the Diaz brothers. Nick made a lot of noise in 2020 about coming back. Dana kind of put the water on that one, kind of cold water on that one, and just kind of said, I'm not very optimistic about it. That to me says a couple things. One, the negotiations didn't go anywhere. He probably didn't offer Nick enough money, and Nick was probably not budging unless he was offered enough money to get back in that cage. We do know he has been training the last 6 months or so. He's posted videos and pictures. He's definitely starting to look like his old self a little bit in the gym. But, this is a money game. Brandon, you say it all the time. Fight for money. And I don't know. Do you see Nick there? I know you mentioned it before. Do you think Nick is going to come back?
I mean, I think, man, all of these guys that have been waiting, I feel like they're just waiting for like a certain fight. Like there's only like maybe they have like certain people in their mind that they want to fight. And if those people just aren't on the table, then they're not coming back. Because to me, that's just how it is. I feel like it's like we talked about, like saying people want money fights. And I think that's what it is. They're looking for just certain people to fight, especially somebody like Nick Diaz. Like saying the dude hasn't fought in like, I don't know how many years. I think his last fight was against Anderson Silva.
5 years.
Yeah, like it was that fight against Anderson Silva, and we haven't seen him since.
And then the only fight that makes sense, and we'll talk more about Carlos Condit later. I know the word like about, we were joking off air about Dan Hardy and Nick Diaz getting excited about each other. But Carlos Condit and Nick Diaz too makes sense, which is ironic that Carlos Condit's the one calling him out because he's the one that won the fight. But it was never really a clean decision, I guess, in the eyes of the fans. It was one of those fights where technically Carlos Condit just outpointed Nick Diaz the whole time, and the judges went with Carlos Condit, but the fans all saw Nick Diaz pushing for it. I still remember that fight like it was yesterday, and I still remember arguing with so many people because I was like, Carlos Condit was the one landing. He was going backwards, but he was the one landing. Nick Diaz was just throwing a lot of punches and not landing anything. But, it's kind of like that Manny Pacquiao versus Floyd Mayweather, right? Like Manny's coming forward, he's flying a lot of punches, but Floyd's just picking them apart. Yep. And that's kind of the same thing. Like he never had Condit in trouble. Condit was always just taking his time, picking his shots, and that wasn't sexy for the fans. But the judges went with Condit because that was what was real. That was what happened. It was one of the few times I think the MMA judges actually got it right. But yeah, I don't think Nick Diaz is coming back. I think it's been too long. I think it's sexy to talk about. I think it's exciting for fans because Nick Diaz is always such a fan favorite. When they both the Diaz brothers, when they step in the cage, it's fun to talk about. They put it all on the line when they're in there. So that's how I feel about that. The other news is Nate Diaz is now looking to come back. And Dana said it's actually going to be probably at 155. How do you feel about Nate making that cut? It's been a while. Do you think he still wants to fight at 155?
To me, I feel like Nate Diaz is best at 155. Like 170, I feel like he's too small. Like to me, he's one of those guys that, man, he would benefit at a 165 division if there was one, because that's where he belongs. But to me, 155. Yeah, like to me, 155 is where he belongs, because 155 is where he did get a title shot against Benson Henderson. He at 170 he hasn't made any noise.
Well, I wouldn't say he hasn't made any noise. He's made some money.
Except for being Conor McGregor.
Well, he's made some money. You also remember the BMF fight was at 170.
Bro, but he got beat up. He got beat up in that fight.
He did, and I'll agree with you about the power thing too, because if that fight was at 155 with him and Masvidal, I'm not so sure it would be the same, because as huge a Masvidal fan as I am, and I was obviously excited and rooting for Jorge the whole time, Diaz landed some shots. They just didn't phase Masvidal. Mm-hmm. Like he was landing a bunch of combos on Masvidal, and Masvidal just kept coming forward. At 155, I'm not so sure he keeps coming forward. But Masvidal, Cowboy Cerrone now has actually come back to 155 for his last couple of fights. But a lot of these guys, Dos Anjos, a lot of these guys went up and they were comfortable because they didn't have to cut weight anymore. And the bigger money fights, I think, for all of them are at 155, because other than Masvidal, I don't think any of them are really competing for the title. So if they want to get in those headline fights, I think all of them have to be at 155. And I just don't. Who does Diaz fight? Who does Nate Diaz fight?
Gaethje. Like me personally, I had thought Paul Felder would have been the guy, but then I heard he came out and said no, but then I guess the rumor was that it's supposed to be a top 3 lightweight. So I mean, if you really look at the rankings, that only leaves Justin Gaethje.
What about
Charles Oliveira? I mean, a lot of people think Charles Oliveira, but I think Charles Oliveira, he's waiting for that title shot.
What about Dos Anjos?
I mean, I could see it, but from what I hear, it was a top 3, top 5 lightweight. I don't think RDA's in the top 5.
I think he's top 5. I have to look it up. I have to look at the rankings, but I'm pretty sure, especially after that destruction obviously Felder came in at the last second, but the way he destroyed Felder, and it was his first fight back at 155 in years. Former champion. I would say RDA's probably top 5, definitely close if not. The rankings are kind of jumbled up with Hooker being close, and obviously Conor and Dustin and Khabib, like 1, 2, 3. Oliveira's going to jump up in that top 5 if he hasn't already. I don't know. I think Oliveira and Gaethje are the matchup that's going to be made, whether whether Oliveira wants it or not, unfortunately.
Mm.
I don't think Khabib's coming back. And I think if it's going to be an eliminator, I think they're going to have them match up. And the winner's going to fight probably because obviously Dana wanted Chandler and Gaethje to fight. And that just never worked out for timing reasons or whatever the case is. So I think Gaethje and Oliveira are going to have to like square up. And I think the winner is going to have to either fight the winner of the Chandler Hooker fight for the belt. If McGregor does win against Poirier, there's already talk about him going to fight off Manny Pacquiao this summer. So no matter how much they want him in the lightweight title picture, there's no guarantee that Conor's going to wait around for that.
Yeah.
And then you got Dustin. If Dustin wins, Dustin's going to stamp his foot down and say, I'm ready for my title. Former interim champion, another interim champion at that division. So, but you can't give him the championship after fighting at 170. You got to put him in a fight at 155 to see if he's ready, right? Or if he deserves it. So it's kind of weird. There's probably 5 or 6 guys with Dos Anjos being back in the picture. Maybe they can kind of set up some kind of unofficial tournament coming up. And then if Khabib does come back, then it's all just everybody's like stuck in limbo. He might want to hold up the division, but if he comes back, everything's held up because he can only fight one guy at a time.
Yep.
And he might only fight one guy and retire again. And go his 30-0, and then everything's in limbo coming into the fall, and nothing's figured out. It's almost as bad as the heavyweight division. We were talking about Ngannou and Stipe. We've been waiting for that fight a while because Stipe and Cormier had their epic trilogy.
Yep.
And the fans obviously want to see that trilogy. So it sucks for people like Ngannou and Derek Lewis and Blades and some of these other guys that have been waiting.
Yeah.
But, there's
those
certain
dudes.
fights.
Oh yeah, and those dudes are about to get pushed back because apparently Jones is going to get the winner of that heavyweight championship.
Yeah, there's another guy, and 205 is getting all messed up because Izzy's coming up to fight Blachowicz. And what happens at 185 if he wins at 205? Does he do like Anderson and kind of float back and forth? Anderson Silva's always been a big inspiration for him. Is he going to do like Anderson did and go between 205 and 185? Is John Jones ever going to come back to 205 and fight Izzy? There's so many questions that I don't think will ever get answered. It's almost like the unicorn fight, right? I mean, how many years do we scream for, like, especially like in the 2000s of GSP versus Silva? We're like, oh, well, they can meet at 185, and GSP is like, I can never go up to that level, that weight. Of course, then he comes up later out of retirement and wins the middleweight title and then retires again. But unfortunately, that was against Michael Bisping. That wasn't against Anderson Silva. And that's, another dream fight that you never see. We cried for years for Pacquiao versus Mayweather. We saw it, but it took like 3 years past the time when we actually did want to see it. So you never really know if these things are ever going to play out with dream matches. And Izzy coming up to 205 to fight Blachowicz isn't the fight that we wanted. Like, we wanted Jones, and they've been talking so much shit. Now you're seeing it, but it's not the fight. It's just another payday for Izzy. And I think Blachowicz is going to give him hell. I do. I don't think he knows what he's getting into. But he's so technical, he probably could pick Blachowicz apart and probably not put himself at risk for one of those big haymakers that Blachowicz throws. So a lot of stuff to see. That's our news section today, though. We are going to now jump in to the return of the UFC in 2021. I'm talking about Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar, UFC Fight Island 7, a.k.a. UFC ABC 1. I got to say, there were some fights on that card. Of course, we'll jump into the co-main and the main event mostly, but there were some fights on that card that were some major upsets in my mind. Like, nothing really went the way it was supposed to. You're good friends with Phil Halls. That, unfortunately, there's a medical situation we haven't really figured out yet. But his fight got canceled the morning of, which ruined my DraftKings because I didn't really look at it before noon. All of a sudden, when I find out Phil Halls is a fight and the card has already started and I can't take Phil Halls off my card. So needless to say, I did not cash this week. As much as Max Holloway definitely piled up my points for me later in the night. But one of the main, I want to pull a Sergio. If we had talked about it, I definitely was telling people I thought Vanessa Mello was going to upset Sarah Moraes, and I was right about that. Probably the best Vanessa Mello's looked since she's been in the UFC. She's been in some tough matchups before. I didn't really know what to make of the Carlos Felipe Justin Tafa fight. I thought that could go either way. I thought it was ironic. And we've talked about this the last time Felipe fought, about how much shit he talks. But he didn't really talk that much during the Tafa fight. He talked a ton after the fight. Like, if you saw him celebrating after the fight, like, yeah, I'm the greatest in the world. When he was fighting, what's his name? The guy that fought Greg Hardy too, his last fight. He was fighting, and it was the same guy that he actually beat Justin Tafa, I believe, for Tafa's only loss. Pull it up real quick. Jorgen De Castro. When he fought De Castro, he was talking trash the whole fight. Like, in the rounds, outside the rounds, he just kept talking. This fight, I didn't see him say a word. Did you?
No.
He was very humble. He was very definitely, he fought well, but I actually thought Tafa won the fight. Who'd you think?
Yeah, that's what I saw too on a lot of the internet. A lot of people thought Tafa won. I mean, I
thought Tafa was pushing the pace.
Yeah. I mean, Tafa, I know Tafa because his brother also his brother fights for Glory. So I kind of know the family like that. Also, I think they're big. I don't think they're related to Mark Hunt, but I think they know Mark Hunt. So
Mark
I think
Hunt
he might
helped
train with him.
Mark Hunt helped train him. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you already knew that this guy knew how to come out and bang, and that's what he was doing. You know, I think it was. Oh, you go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say I think the reason why Felipe won is because he was throwing more combinations.
Yeah.
I thought Tafa kept looking for a knockout punch. Like, he would throw one shot, wait, one shot, wait. Like, he would pick his shots. He kept coming forward. And I guess it's kind of hypocritical to think that, Tafa won when I just said Nick Diaz lost for the same thing. But Felipe definitely was more accurate in landing. But at the same time, Tafa was controlling the cage, and he was controlling. He was landing too. He just wasn't landing as much. He was just, there. And then of course they were stood in the cage a couple times and just went toe to toe right in the middle. So it was a fun fight. I will say that it was a fun fight. And unfortunately, if Dana thought that Kevin Holland was the only loudmouth he had, he's definitely got some fun stuff ahead with Carlos Felipe. That's going to be fun. One of the picks that I had last week, every week we go and we pick the main and the co-main, and then we pick our own fight. And the fight I had was Dusko Todorovic and against Soriano. And I honestly thought Soriano hadn't fought enough competition. I thought Todorovic just looked amazing his last fight. And he comes out and Soriano just pieces him up and then knocks him out. There was like a slight stoppage, I believe, for like a low blow or something like that. And then all of a sudden he just comes out and finishes him. Like, he got angry. He came out and that was it. And I don't know if it helped or hurt either fighter in that situation. I don't know. Like, do you think either fighter really got phased by a win or loss in that fight? Because they were both up and coming, but neither one are there yet.
Well, I mean, to me, if you win and you win in that fashion, he straight starched him. He caught him, finished him. That puts eyeballs on. That put eyeballs on him. That builds up his popularity. I mean, I don't know what the game plan was for Doiska, because like I said, I picked him with you because I liked how he fought his last time too. But he came out with his hands down. Like, he had his hands down.
That was crazy. Yeah.
I mean, I know on the broadcast, I think Dan Hardy said, like, oh yeah, he might have his hands down because he's worried about Soriano taking him down. And he was just going to rely on his movement. But bro, when you're up against the cage, you can't really move. You got to keep your hands up. And that's really what Soriano did. Soriano was putting him up against the cage and he was going to work on it.
That never made sense to me either. Because if you actually look at Soriano's background, most of his wins are by knockout.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that Dan Hardy might have a little more insight than, say, somebody like myself, because he's seen a lot of these guys train. But I mean, where his only other previous UFC fight was a knockout against, Piachota. Like, I don't know. I didn't see that. I think that was bad. I think that was bad cornering if that was the plan.
Exactly. Because that was my only thing. My only thing was like, yo, why just got his hands down? Like, yeah, man, his movement was good. But it was like, yo, eventually that guy, he's gonna get the timing on you. And that's what happened. He caught him. He was on spaghetti legs, and he went for the finish. His mouthpiece came out like more than once. He actually lost his mouthpiece.
He had to get a second
mouthpiece. He had to get a second mouthpiece, and he still got stopped.
Yeah, he digged it out of the cage. Like, the ref was trying to get it out, and he couldn't get it. He's like, "Where's the second mouthpiece?" And he's like, "No, I'll get it." And he went and pulled it out of the cage. I thought that was kind of funny. Other fights on that card. Everybody loved Buckley last year. That's another upset. I didn't think it was too much of an upset. Di Chirico has always been super tough. I don't know. Alessio Di Chirico just basically waited his time. He's another guy just picked his shots. He picked his shots. He was very patient, and Buckley kept coming forward, and he got caught with that head kick. That's right up your alley right there.
I mean, yeah, I was gonna say, like, when you watch that fight in the beginning of the round, what's his name again? We gotta say it. Not Buckley.
Alessio Di Chirico.
Dorico. He actually threw a head kick at Buckley.
Come on, Brandon. You're always the guy who just says the first name when you can't do it. Alessio.
Yeah. All right. So Buckley blocked it, but Buckley was standing up. But then, of course, if you watch that fight, Buckley's like throwing his body shots, but he's always dropping down. Or when he's coming forward, he drops down. So really, all what Alessio had to do was Alessio didn't really have to even do a head kick. He kind of threw it like neck height, because Buckley like drops down into it, and that's what happened. It went over his hand, caught him in the temple. He was out. It was a done deal. So it was one of those things where I think, like say, he was just waiting. Like, he set him up. He threw that high kick. Like, that's the thing, is like, well, Buckley, you should have known that head kick was coming again, because he threw it out there to let you know that, hey, he can go up there. Like, I don't know if maybe what Buckley thought was that he would throw a head kick, he would go over him, because that's why he kept on dropping down. But I think Alessio just timed it right, because he knew he was going to come forward, and he just caught him.
Yeah, I think Buckley still has a bright future. I think he's fun to watch, right? He goes for the knockout almost every time. He's not trying to go to decision. He's fun to watch. But you got a lot of guys like Alessio that have been around. Like, he's been in the UFC, what now, 4 years?
Mm-hmm.
Almost 5 years. And the only time he's been stopped was he got caught in a triangle choke back in 2017 against Spicely. He went the distance with people like Kevin Holland, who's stopping everybody right now, and that was just last year. So you knew he was tough. You knew, and I think my personal opinion, the only time he's ever been stopped in his career was that one submission. Every other thing, the other 4 losses were decision. If you're Alessio and you're going into a fight that you don't have to worry about getting submitted, like it's come clear throughout his career, if the only way he ever gotten stopped was submission, and you go into a fight and you don't have to worry about a guy trying to submit you, I think that was right, like tailor-made for him. Yep. And yeah, at any given time, Buckley could have put his lights out, but this guy's never been stopped by knockout, and he's fought some heavy hitters. So I just think that fight was kind of tailor-made for him. He's also, good friends with Marvin Vettori. They're both Italian, both, trying to make a name for themselves. I think this fight does way more for Di Chirico than it does hurts Buckley, because, sometimes these knockouts can be considered flukes. Sometimes they can be considered legit. But for a 31-year-old fighter and Alessio Di Chirico, it gives him another chance to get another payday. And they can go back to the drawing board with Buckley, because once you have a knockout like that, people want to see you in the cage. So he's going to get another fight no matter what.
Yep.
The fight that you picked last week, actually, Li Jingliang versus Ponzinibbio. Yeah, I always butcher that. Ponzinibbio. Man, we knew he was out for a few years, right?
Yep.
And he had a lot of medical issues off and on for the last couple of years. We kept waiting to see if this guy was going to fulfill his potential. He was kind of knocking on the door a couple of years ago, but he wasn't quite there. I think hindsight, you kind of look at it and you're like, well, we thought he was coming, but he wasn't there yet. But we all thought this was going to be a good fight to get his feet back under him, and he was going to get ready to keep taking that next step. I agreed with you last week when you picked him to win. I didn't think Lee basically gave him much of a challenge. Well, we were wrong.
Yeah.
What went wrong for him in that fight?
I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's just, man, he hasn't been in a while, because I really want to say I felt like he wasn't throwing really as much as he probably could have been or should have been. And Leach, man, just came in, dropped him, but he dropped him with the hammer, because Leach was throwing. I mean, we all know Leach,
no fear.
Yeah, I mean, Leach has power like that. Like I mean, that's one of the things, man. Like, he can throw, he'll bang with you. Like that's one of the reasons why I thought this would be a good one for Ponzinibbio, because Ponzinibbio has fast hands. This way, man, he get his hand speed going. But to me, he never really got going. Because I mean, you even, I think they even said it if you watch the fight too in the beginning, where they were kind of like, oh, like these guys are kind of feeling each other out, which I understand. Ponzinibbio hasn't been in a minute, but I just want to say Leach got going before he did.
Yeah, I think, I don't think it would have changed even if it went later, personally. I think if it went to the second round, I think it would have just been more of the same. He looked like he had, Dominic Cruz always famously says there's no such thing as ring rust. That's not true for everyone.
Yeah.
I think he definitely looked like he hadn't been in you can spar all you want. You can sit there, especially during this time with COVID and everything, you can be in that, you can train, you can do what you want. There's difference between, and I can draw from my other sports experiences. They say you practice how you play, and that's definitely true. But because if you don't practice well, you're not going to fight well. You're not going to play well. But practice isn't playing. Practice isn't fighting. Practice is just practice. And you can spar as hard as you want. When the bright lights are turned on, this is the first fight card UFC's had in probably 10 or 11 months with fans.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to travel because it's not where either one we're from. That's a lot of pressure, and that's a whole new world. And you can say ring rust isn't real, cage rust isn't real, but Ponzinibbio definitely looked rusty. He looked rusty. That's all there was to that. He may bounce back, but now he's going to do it with a loss on his record. And I think another guy, much like Alessio, Lee now has a name for himself too to make some money. So we'll see what happens with him. Now on to the co-main and the main event. Of course, both of us went with Carlos Condit in our picks last week. Carlos Condit, always a popular favorite. Everybody loves the natural-born killer. Him and Matt Brown. Condit won unanimously, 30-27. I don't know about you, Brandon. I was a little shocked that it was 30-27. I had 29-28. I thought Matt Brown definitely brought the fight. I don't think, we've been waiting now 3 times to get this fight, and it finally happened. Probably 5 years too late, 3 years too late. Maybe I think 2017 was the first time they tried to line it up.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. For whatever reason, they just never, kind of like Ferguson and Khabib, it just never happened. And finally got the fight. I mean, I thought it was a close fight for a while. I think Condit controlled it late. I definitely didn't have it 30-27. I don't know. What about you?
I did have it 30-27. Reason why is because in that first round, Condit was piecing him up, standing up. Matt Brown did take him down, but all Matt Brown did was control him. But while Carlos Condit was on the ground, he was doing damage. Yeah. He was hitting him. He was the one doing the strikes. Matt Brown was just holding them there. So yes, he did have control time, but he wasn't doing any damage. He wasn't doing any strikes. He was just holding them there, just keeping there. While Carlos Condit was smacking them, in both sides of his head, throwing elbows, throwing punches. So that's the reason why I gave him the first round, because I think that's the only round that people maybe could have gave Matt Brown was the first round, because there's no way he won the second and third. Because other than that, it's like I told you, man, Carlos Condit, I think just a better striker, mixed it up, through his punches and kick combo. I mean, my man had a beautiful sweep as well, which nobody thought was going to happen. That was cool. Yeah, that was just awesome. Like I told you, I just felt like he just had some tricks that he's been working on, and he put him on display on ABC.
Yeah, that was almost like a wrestling move. That was kind of cool the way he kind of swept and kind of like took him down with it at the same time. I kind of disagree with the first round. Not that I don't disagree with what you said about him being on the ground and doing more work than Matt Brown did, but I think you're kind of underestimating the kind of work that Matt Brown did when they were both on their feet too. And I think they were kind of going both back and forth. I think Condit did enough in each round where I don't necessarily disagree with 30-27, but I think because each round was kind of closer, I kind of like thought maybe the judges might have given Brown one of the rounds. But I guess you're right about 2 and 3. They're not really that close. But Brown was in it. It wasn't like he was getting destroyed each round either. He was getting his shots in too. He would land a big blow each round too. So it was going back and forth. Matt Brown, unfortunately, has lost now, I think 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6. He kind of semi-retired anyway already. I honestly don't think he has to retire, but I don't think he can fight a top-level guy anymore. I mean, I would almost read like, I don't know if Diego Sanchez wants to come back up to 170. I think he's only fought there like once maybe. But I wouldn't mind seeing Matt Brown and Diego Sanchez kind of having like a sail off in the sunset type fight. I think that would be fun. Unfortunately, they probably both would end up very bloody, but I think that would be fun. Carlos Condit, what's next for him? What do you see?
I mean, his contract is up. That was his last fight.
I don't think he's leaving the UFC.
I mean, that's what a lot of people say. I mean, he has been under the Zuffa UFC WEC brand. I'm just thinking, man, hey, man, if he really rides it out, I can see PFL making a run for him. He's an American. They need somebody else in that 170 division that maybe could fight Rory McDonald, because we didn't talk about him last week. We don't talk about Anthony Pettis, but Rory McDonald, he might want to be the star for the PFL. But at least that way, there's somebody at 170 that can maybe give Rory a challenge. So that way people don't think that Rory's just gonna run through the division. So just saying, man, and I'm just saying, like I said, man, we're prize fighters. Saying if PFL is gonna always throw out that $1 million at the end, and plus 2, man, you're getting paid for each fight as well. Like, I'm just saying,
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say about the PFL, and yeah, you're talking about Rory McDonald and Anthony Pettis. They're both around 30. Anthony Pettis has been fighting a very long time, but he's still not that old.
Yep.
But Condit is 36. He'll be turning 37 this year. I don't see it. Now, I could see him matching up in Bellator. I think there's a bunch of fun fights for him there. And maybe even a fight with Diego Lima, because he doesn't have many challengers there. Maybe a fight with MVP.
Michael Venom Page, yeah.
Yeah. I could see that. I could see a lot of fun fights. I personally think he's playing hardball for a new contract. He won his last 2 fights. He looked really great. He's a fan favorite. Dana probably tried to lowball him at first, like, oh, yeah, we'll offer you an extension and we'll give you this much money. Well, he went out, he bet on himself, and he looked great for 2 fights in a row. Obviously, it's Court McGee and it's Matt Brown. It's not, Jorge Masvidal or Colby Covington or any of these top-level 170 guys. But people want to see Carlos Condit. And if he could be the co-main event on some of these cards, we're going to talk in just a minute about the card tomorrow. But if you look at that card tomorrow, the co-main event is Alves versus Lazes.
Yep.
How many people who are casual MMA fans know who either one of those guys are?
They don't.
I mean, honestly, the most notable names on that card are guys who've been fighting for the last decade, which is Matt Schnell and Tyson Nam. So if you have a guy like Carlos Condit, he fills a need, right? He's a name. You don't have to put him in the main event, but he's a name you can put against any of these, especially these up and coming fighters, like a gatekeeper kind of way Cowboy Cerrone's done a couple of times. He's money. He's money in the box office. There's no. Dana's just lost Anthony Pettis to PFL. Obviously, he let Romero and those guys walk. He cut them, and McDonald's been gone a long time. I mean, he actually just walked away from Bellator.
Yep.
I don't want to say it negatively, but kind of with his tail between his legs, right? Like, he lost in Bellator. He lost to Lima. Yeah, he wasn't the same. I mean, he lost a couple times.
No, and not Lima. Gegard, because he did the fight. He moved up.
We lost to both of them.
Fight Gegard, yeah.
He lost to both of them.
Yeah.
And Rory McDonald, when he was in the UFC, was dominant. People were talking about him. Everybody, would he fight his teammate and George St. Pierre? And a lot of times we're like, well, that fight's never going to happen because they're friends. So he goes to Bellator. He had a very lackluster draw with John Fitch. People forget about that, and they should, because it was a horrible fight. He lost to Masasi. He lost his last fight to Lima. He did beat Lima too. People do forget he did beat Lima, but the last fight wasn't even close. The rematch was not even close. Rory McDonald did go to Bellator. He did make a splash right away. He was one of the people that Scott Coker brought in, and it paid off, right? He beat Paul Daly. He beat Lima, won the title, but then he immediately lost the title to Musasi, who then lost it back to Lima. Just didn't show up against Fitch. Neiman Gracie, for all of his technical skills, is not going to strike with a guy like Rory McDonald.
Yep.
And Rory's definitely proficient enough on the ground to stay out of trouble with somebody like Gracie. And then Lima just ran through him the last time they fought. So, going off a loss, same way he actually left UFC, right? He left UFC off a loss against Wonderboy. So that's, I think, the reason why nobody's talking about Rory McDonald going over to PFL. I don't think it's uneventful. I think there's going to be some fun fights. Ray Sefo has done a really good job over the years of making a lot out of nothing. World Series of Fighting, whether you want to talk, I know Sergio brought it up before with Ali and the connection with all the fighters there. But Justin Gaethje, Marlon Moraes, a lot of these guys, Anthony Rumble Johnson, when he was there, actually revived his career.
Yep. Same thing with Arlovsky. He revived his career there too.
Arlovsky. And then, they switch over to the Pro Fighters League, start the tournament format. They kind of bring back what Bellator used to do. And they reinvented themselves, but there's still Kayla Harrison and Carissa Shields, Lance Palmer, some of those guys who are kind of reinvented themselves. Lance Palmer was struggling for a while, and now all of a sudden he's the man there. Anthony Pettis is there. Now Rory McDonald's there. I know you were talking about before with Yoel Romero and some of those other guys. That would be fun, but I don't see to wrap it back around where we were still talking about the fight card. I don't see Carlos Condit going there. I don't see Carlos Condit leaving the UFC. We all know anything's possible. I think he's angling for a bigger payday, and I think, even though I don't think Nick Diaz is coming back, I think he's angling for Nick Diaz. You want to get the last word on that one before we talk about Max?
Hey man, you're probably right. It's one of those things because he's a guy who's been with the UFC and the WEC, the Zuffa brand forever. So I'm saying, we just can't see him leaving. Just like a GSP did and everything like that. So we'll see if he comes back. But to me though, I feel like if they don't offer him anything, then that's when I say I can see a PFL swooping in and picking him up.
What about Condit GSP? You just mentioned it.
I know, but I don't think GSP is fighting again. I think his days are done. I think he really is done.
Okay. The reason why we took so long getting to the main event is because there's not much to talk about with the main event. Both you and I agreed Max Holloway was going to win this fight. I think, playing devil's advocate, we always bring up the opponent's potential, right? We did it when Pitbull fought Cavaro a couple months ago, and it ended up being a slaughter. Max Holloway is arguably the uncrowned champion. In many people's eyes, he won that last fight with Volkanovski. I thought he clearly won the first 3 rounds, kind of dragged the last 2. I don't think there's any way he lost that fight, though. And obviously, MMA judging, we talk about it all the time. Don't leave it in the hands of the judges. Anything can happen. Well, not this time. He can leave it in the hands of the judges very easily, because this might have been the most lopsided scoring I've ever seen in the history of MMA. It was 50-49 50-43, 50-43, and 50-42. That's a lot of 10-8 rounds. That's not to say Calvin Kattar didn't land some shots. He did. He did. Absolutely. He rocked. Max once talked like he was untouchable, but he got rocked a couple times. I saw Max
by looking at his face.
Yeah. I saw Max take a couple steps back a couple times. And obviously everybody wants to pull to like the Muhammad Ali moments at the end of the fight where he was amped up. He was, as Daniel Cormier said, he was in a zone, a different zone, a whole new zone, because he was talking shit to the outside cage. He was talking to the announcers, still fighting Calvin Kattar, not even looking at Calvin Kattar. I thought it was funny. He did get hit one of the times he looked away. But the rest of the time, Max was on his game. Like, I don't see anybody in that division other than Volkanovski who can kind of wrestle him and make things tough for him. Nobody else in that division can touch Max Holloway. What do you think?
Hey man, Max looked real good. Like I said, I felt like his volume would be too much for Calvin Kattar, and that's what it was. I mean, you talk about volume. The dude just set a new record. Most strikes out here.
Especially on his feet. Nobody's ever done that on their feet. Even the previous record was including ground strikes. This fight never touched the ground.
Yeah. So I mean, just Max looked good, man. Yeah, like I said, I think his team they set up a different game plan. They said, hey, this is how we want you to fight. He went out, did it. I mean, I think it was extra motivation since Calvin Kattar was talking smack about him being the best boxer. And
Calvin said he was going to stop him. I was like, no way.
Yeah. And then also about Calvin Kattar, trying to say that he's a senior, Max is a freshman. And that's when Max came up and in the fight, and he was like, yo, the freshman is here. The freshman came. So, I mean, man, Max is good. He does his thing.
We talked about this not too long ago. He's the GOAT of the division. Yeah. And that's no disrespect to Jose Aldo. But the things Max Holloway, the fighters he's fought, there's nobody better in that 145-pound division, for my money, in the history of that division. And I was actually having a conversation with somebody on Twitter earlier this past week, and man, I mean, the dude, I already know the guy's a Conor fan, so he was trying to put Conor in the mix. And I was like, bro, Conor didn't. He wasn't there long enough.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was telling him. Like, I was trying to say, like, yo, it's Holloway. So, because it was Holloway, Aldo, and Conor is who he had. And I was like, Conor had good wins on like Poirier and Holloway and Aldo, but he never defended his belt. Holloway has the records. He defended his belt. He had the winning streak. He's setting records, like how he just did. So to me, if you go by just those three guys, Holloway's the best one of them, of the three.
I mean, in fairness, Conor had 6, maybe 7. Let me look. I want to say he had 7 fights at 145.
Yeah,
maybe.
But I want to say, man, because I want to say, man, that Chad Mendes fight. I think Mendes took that fight in like 2 weeks' notice, so he really wasn't.
He gave him hell until he got caught.
Yeah.
Dennis Seaver got obliterated. Poirier was tough. Brando got obliterated. Brimage got obliterated. That was his first fight. Max went the distance with him, but in fairness, Max never had a chance of winning that fight. Conor was out. That was a different Max Holloway. That was 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 7.5 years ago. That the different people.
Yeah, and Conor, and I want to say in that fight, Conor actually took him down, and he was holding him down. He was grappling with him.
I mean, Conor did a little of everything in that fight, but
because I think that's how he tore his ACL in that fight. McGregor did.
Yeah, and he still dominated that fight. But that was a 22-year-old Max Holloway. Max is 29 now. He's in his prime. He had those weird. Nobody knows what exactly went down with Max Holloway the last couple years. Whether
it was Khabib weigh-ins and everything like that.
Yeah, you don't know if it was concussion related, but mentally something was not right with Max Holloway. He was slurring his speeches and interviews. He was. You could just tell something was off about Max Holloway, and it looked that way in the cage too. When Max was in the cage for those fights, the Volkanovski fights, the Dustin Poirier fight. He was bouncing between 145 and 155, just trying to take every payday that came his way. That said, the only fights he lost were Dustin Poirier and Volkanovski. He still was beating everybody else. He didn't look 100% great against Ortega and, the doctor stoppage and everything else, but Ortega was not winning that fight. Ortega was getting dominated by Max Holloway.
Yep.
That fight was stopped because of a doctor stoppage, but that was because of damage caused by Max Holloway. I think it was Ortega's eye or something like that.
Yeah.
He lost to Poirier, then came back and beat Frankie Edgar, lost a couple tough fights to Volkanovski. Volkanovski clearly won the first fight. I don't think anybody doubts that. But that was when Max didn't look like Max. Anybody who saw Max talk this week, anybody saw Max interview this week, the way he was going about his business, he was joking about stealing John Anning's job.
Mm-hmm.
Max Holloway was having fun this week. That was a bad sign for Calvin Kattar. That was a really bad sign for Calvin Kattar. That's the Max Holloway we've seen the last few years. That was the most dominant featherweight in the history of this business, period. Yeah, Conor ran through the division. He never lost. And I'm not going to discount the person you were talking about Conor being the top 3. I would give Conor top 3 all-time featherweight. I don't even think that's a debate. I think Aldo's clearly number 2. He was absolutely the most dominant featherweight in the history of the division. But I think Aldo was still in fighting prime when he fought Max Holloway, and Max Holloway pieced him up. Yeah, Max Holloway fought him again. Yeah, and they fought him again and pieced him up again. Jose Aldo now is in the twilight of his career, but when they first fought, Max Holloway beat his ass. I think they didn't pass the torch to Holloway. He took it. I think the only thing left is for Uriah Faber to come out of the grave and fight him for like a 15th time. But no, I think Max Holloway is great. I think he's back. I know nobody likes to see those trilogies of fights that they've lost twice in a row. You talk about Benavidez, Mighty Mouse always being the famous one that we bring up all the time. Well, what else is there for Max? What's next for him? Who do you think he should fight next if he can't fight Volkanovski?
I mean, people like to talk about Zabit. They want to say he's the next big thing, but that dude don't fight either, man. I feel like Zabit is waiting for a title shot, but it's like, dude, you haven't done enough to get a title shot. So
I don't see that fight even being competitive, though, honestly.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for Kattar's going to fall back in line. There's not many fights there for him. The 145-pound division is not empty, but it's really like a 2 or 3 man race.
Yeah, and Yair Rodriguez is on suspension, so who knows when he's coming back.
Maybe Kattar versus Zombie. That might be fun.
Yeah, could be that.
That's the only other fight I could think that would make sense. The Zombie didn't look good his last fight either. T-City pieced him up too.
But I mean, I think it's one of the things too. Like, I think with Zombie as well, like T-City hasn't fought in like 2 years, but I think like Zombie didn't fight in like a year as well. Like, I think they were both on long layoffs.
I mean, that's not to take away from Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega looked fantastic his last fight. I'm really looking forward to, we talked about earlier, him and Volkanovski going in March 27th. That's going to be a fun fight. And Ortega is skilled enough on the ground that if Volkanovski tries to wrestle him, he might get submitted. Because if he goes down with T-City, that might be a quick night for him. Because people forget, as good as Ortega looked on his feet last fight, he made his name submitting people.
Yep.
He's a big jiu-jitsu guy.
Yeah, that's what the T-City stands for, Triangle City.
Yeah. That's not somewhere Volkanovski wants to go. So I think it's a very bad matchup, and we may end up seeing Max and Ortega fight again, which is also a bad matchup for Ortega. So, I mean, you live and you learn. Maybe Ortega's better this time. Obviously, as being a martial artist, being in the gym all the time, you're always trying to improve. You're always trying to get better. You could be 25, you can be 55. The whole point of martial arts is always trying to improve yourself mentally, physically, discipline-wise. Maybe Ortega does give Holloway a better fight next time, but not this Max Holloway.
Yeah.
All right, so that's our results. We're going to go ahead and move on real quickly. We're not going to spend too much time on the card tomorrow. We're just going to make our picks for the co-main event. and the main event, and then we'll pick one other fight on the card that kind of stands out to us. Starting off with the co-main event, Brandon, Warley Alves versus Monier Lazis, fighting at 170. Who you got and why?
To be honest with you, I'm like, honestly, I really wasn't even thinking about this co-main event, but
yeah, unfortunately, that's what we got.
Yeah, I know. I guess because there's other fights on this card that I'm more intrigued with, but to answer your question though, I'm picking Alves because one, I know more about him. Plus, I just think he's better. Seeing these guys fight, I just think Alves is just gonna pull it off. I probably say he's gonna go decision.
I'm actually gonna disagree with you. Finally we'll get our picks like mismatched. One of us is going to be in first place next week. We are keeping track this year, ladies and gentlemen. On the bottom of every description for each episode, you're going to see our current results. So Brandon and I, plus whatever special guests we have on for throughout this year, keep track. At the end of the year, maybe we'll figure out some kind of cool little prize, give the winner something, but we'll see. But Lazis just came off beating Razak Hassan by decision. He stopped Muradi by TKO in a different promotion. I think he's probably got the better momentum. He's 10-1 going against a 13-4 fighter who's coming off losing 2 out of his 3 fights. Yeah, it's a tough loss to Randy Brown. He got caught in the triangle. Alves did. Got knocked out by Kraus. But he did knock out Sergio Moraes in the middle of that. So it's going to be a competitive fight. I personally am picking Lazis. I just think he has more momentum. But I don't think there's a clear-cut winner in that fight. So we shall see tomorrow. The card's at, I believe, the same time, like noon and 3 o'clock on the main card, like it was last Saturday.
Nah. The main card starts at noon. The prelims start at 9 a.m.
Oh, so they're going way early tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah. So basically tomorrow is breakfast and fights.
Yeah, and then inauguration. So you got the fights on one screen, the other fights on the other screen. All right, the main event: Michael Chiesa versus Neil Magny. I'm a huge Neil Magny fan. I'll start off on this one. I'm picking Magny to beat Chiesa, and that's not no disrespect to Chiesa because he's been on quite a roll too lately. He's won 3 straight fights, including beating Rafael dos Anjos that we were talking about earlier. He's beat Diego. He beat Carlos Condit a couple years ago. His only losses were Pettis and Kevin Lee, which are super tough. And, of course, Joe Lozon a while ago and Jorge Masvidal even longer ago. But over the last couple of years, he's been Michael Chiesa has been one of the best fighters in that division. But Neil Magny's looked possessed his last 3 fights. And that Robbie Lawler fight, he pieced him up. Probably could have finished him. He just didn't go for it. Ponzinibbio, we were talking about earlier, is the last guy to beat him. Both guys, unfortunately for fans of Carlos Condit, have a win over Carlos Condit in the last few years. The only fight they really have in common, I guess, is that Magny lost to Dos Anjos. But I think Magny's going over this fight. I think he's looked cleaner and crisper. I think Chiesa, even though he won his last fight, wasn't as crisp as he's been in the past. And if you wrestle or go to the ground with Magny, I think he has enough to get back onto his feet and still get you. And he can also sub you too. People forget he has 3 sub wins too. So Magny's no slouch as far as the submission goes as well. Who you got in that fight?
This one was a tough one for me. I was going back and forth with it because I actually am a Neil Magny fan. I like him. He's basically the only person from the god awful season of, what was it, Tough 16, I think they were, that trash season where Dana White was like, yo, none of you guys are coming back. But he was the only one. I mean, he didn't even win it because it was Colton Smith who won it, but he's the one that stuck around. I just think Neil Magny. By
the way,
wait, say it again.
It was 15.
It was 15. I think no. 15 was the live season. That's the one that Chiesa was on. And the following season, that's the one that Neil Magny was on.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Chiesa. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. So yeah. What was I saying? Oh, like Neil Magny, I think he's finally learned that he's a tall guy. Tall guys need to learn how to be tall. What that means is that they got to learn to use their reach. And that's what he's been doing his last 2 fights, because that's what he did with Robbie Lawler, using his jab, keeping him at bay. The only thing I'm worried about is that, yes, Magny does have some jiu-jitsu skills, but he's not on that level of Chiesa. Chiesa has that wrestling, he takes him down. He's real strong. I think he can hold Magny down. To me, if Magny keeps his fight standing up, is his. The only thing I'm worried about is that Chiesa might take him down, and then that way he can get a submission on him. But I am going with Magny because, again, I think he's just his cardio's off the charts. So I'm just hoping maybe, man, it's a main event. He might maybe take him into deep waters, and Chiesa he could get gassed.
It's possible. Much like the co-main event, I don't think there's a clear cut in this one either. This is going to be a fun fight, and I think Magny has enough to stay on his feet. I also think, Chiesa doesn't have enough on his feet. He will grapple you, he will grab you, and you're done.
Yep.
But Magny's slick enough to avoid that, and I think Magny's gonna win this fight. Pick a fight, and then we'll jump on to 257. Any more? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say Tyson Nam.
Damn, you stole mine.
Yeah. All right, fine.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, man, Tyson Nam, man, he's been on the hot streak, man. He's been dropping dudes all last year. I just think he has the mentality of just going for broke, because, like I said, man, he's trying to move up, man. He's trying to make a splash. I just think he's gonna stop. I think he's gonna stop Matt Schnell as well, like how he did last year to the other 2 fights.
Matt Schnell's always been a tale of 2 cities. The guy's been loaded with potential all the way back to where he had the MTV show Caged, and everybody thought this kid was going to be the next big thing. But then he'll lose, like, whenever he gets, like, not even the title shot. He'll get, like, the contender level, and he'll lose. It's always tough. And Tyson Nam has been, he's active again, but he took a long time off too. That's tough. I think I'd go with Tyson Nam too, but just never sleep on Matt Schnell. Just never sleep on him. You just don't know. The only other fight I'm really kind of excited for that card, a lot of people don't really know about it, Ricky Simon versus Perello. Ricky Simon is fun to watch. Like, I really enjoy watching that guy fight. Him against Ray Borg was a split decision. I don't think it was a split decision. I think he beat Borg. He fought a fun, tough fight against Rob Font. He fought a tough fight against Yaya. Fortunately, he did get knocked out by Uriah Faber, which kind of gave Uriah Faber a second life. You're talking about a guy that went on like 8-fight winning streak or something like that before the Faber loss. Mm-hmm. So Ricky Simon's fun to watch in that 135-pound division. El Tiger Perello, he's another guy who's won a couple fights in a row in different promotions. I've never actually seen him fight in a major promotion, but like I said, I'm a big fan of Ricky Simon, so I see Ricky Simon winning that fight. Do you see that going any other way?
I mean, hey man, it's the fight game. It could go any way, but I am rooting for Ricky Simon. I just think he's with a good team. I think he knows what he wants to do, and man, he's got himself a nice mullet. So let's see how that works for him.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the big main event. I feel like we've been talking about this fight card for ever, since they first even whispered the names Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier too. Obviously, Conor and Dustin been trying to fight each other even before the UFC made it official. They were talking about doing a charity fight where all the money went to Poirier's charity. I'm pretty sure Conor's still donating his salary to Poirier's inner city charity in Louisiana. So we'll see how that plays out. But we've been waiting for this fight card a long time. There's some really good fights on the card. We're going to start off with the co-main event. Another guy we've been talking about, I feel like, for longer than we've seen him in the cage. Michael Chandler, Dan Hooker. I don't even remember the last time we saw Michael Chandler in the cage. Do you?
He knocked out. Yeah, he knocked out Benson Henderson.
Was that the last one?
Yep.
So that wasn't actually too long ago. That was in August. That was the last fight of his contract, and of course he became a free agent. Left Bellator. Was with Bellator for a very long time. I want to say almost 10 years. Pretty much exactly 10 years. Fought some classic fights with Eddie Alvarez. the Benson Henderson fight. He's fought Pitbull, Brett Primus. He's fought both Pitbulls, Derek Campos. So Michael Chandler's been around for a very long time, been very successful, fighting Dan Hooker, who, I mean, I remember like yesterday that classic he just had with Paul Felder not too long ago. He took Dustin the distance. Dustin was never in danger in that fight. That was a fight Dustin, I think, clearly was dominating. But Dan Hooker would just not go away. He beat up Ali Iaquinta. He beat up James Vick. He did get stopped by Barboza, but he's also one of the last people to beat Gilbert Burns too.
Yep.
So Dan Hooker's always super, super tough. And it's not going to be an easy trip for Michael Chandler in this cage. Who do you got in that fight, and tell me why?
I'm picking Dan Hooker. And the reason why is because Michael Chandler, who used to be a wrestler, started knocking people out. He loves his striking. He's going to strike with a striker. He's going to get dropped. That's all it is. If Michael Chandler comes out and he wrestles, he'll get the W. But if he stands with Dan Hooker has the reach and he's a better striker. You think about where he comes from. He trains with Israel Adesanya, City Kickboxing. Those dudes know how to strike. Volkanovski's there too as well. So I'm saying those dudes know how to strike. You're going to come strike with a striker, you're going to go to sleep. So that's the reason why I think Dan Hooker's going to win, because I know Michael Chandler, he loves his striking now. You know, he doesn't really wrestle. You know, he caught Benson Henderson. Why? They were two wrestlers striking. Of course he's going to get it. But he went with Pitbull, which Pitbull has jiu-jitsu. So Michael Chandler was probably like, oh, you know what? I really don't want to stand with him. And boom, Pitbull stopped, beat him as well. So I just think Dan Hooker is going to outstrike him. He has the reach. He has the kickboxing experience, better striker, better technique, and he gets his hand raised.
I am so on the fence about this decision. I've gone back and forth. I wanted to say Dan Hooker for a while too. I'm actually going to go with Michael Chandler, only because even though Dan Hooker's bounced around between 155 and 170, Michael Chandler trains with a lot of big dudes. Like, you're talking about wrestling. He trains with Brian Bader and those guys out in Power MMA. And there's not really too many small guys for him to train with in that gym that I at least like name fighters. Does he really focus on his wrestling anymore? Not in fights, you're right. He goes out trying to knock people out. But I've seen him go back and forth and wrestle. I saw in that Brett Primus rematch, he definitely used his wrestling. He used it a little bit against Benson Henderson, if you remember. Like, he came out, kind of threw Benson off balance, and then he knocked him out. I honestly think I'm going to go with Chandler. I'm not sold on it, but you don't know when somebody, makes that jump. We saw Hector Lombard do a long time in Bellator. He came over. He wasn't unsuccessful in the UFC. He obviously had the drug suspensions and other stuff, but he definitely didn't make the splash that people thought he was going to make. Eddie Alvarez was up and down when he came over. I think you were talking last week about Will Brooks. It's another guy. It's hard to make that jump the other way into the UFC. Not impossible. It's been done a couple times before, but
Justin Gaethje.
Yeah, Justin obviously coming from PFL, but still, I'm gonna go with Chandler, but I don't feel good about that pick. Main event, like I said, we've been talking about this forever. Dustin Poirier getting his rematch against Conor McGregor. Last time they fought, Dustin gave him a little bit of a fit, but Conor caught him with a shot, finished him. Something that's been eating at Dustin for years. Dustin's been begging for a rematch at every weight class possible. If that fight went a little bit longer, I'm not sure Conor wins that fight, but it is what it is. Conor got the stoppage. Conor got the win. I would argue Conor's a better fighter now than he was then too. And we always talk about the evolution. We talk about all the time off that Conor's had. He didn't mean to take a year off last year. Obviously, he kept begging for a fight from anybody from Khabib to Diego Sanchez. He didn't care. He just wanted to fight. And then, of course, with COVID and travel restrictions and everything else that went on in the last 12 months, we haven't seen Conor back in the cage since he finished Cowboy Cerrone super quick. Yeah, he looked great against Cowboy. But what is Conor right now? We don't know other than seeing a few training videos. He looks super in shape, super jacked. Another reason why I don't think, I've said this before, I don't think Conor, if he wins, I don't think he goes for the 155 title unless it's against Khabib, unless it's for that payday. I think he's gotten very comfortable at 170 pounds. When they announced this fight, everybody's like, oh, it'll be at 155. And no, they immediately came out and said, no, it's going to be at 170. We've never seen Dustin fight at this high of a weight class. So I think that favors Conor. And Conor now has fought his last 4 fights at 170. Like, when was the last time he even fought at 155?
That was the Khabib fight.
Yeah, Khabib, you're right. Okay, so he fought his last 2 fights before Cowboy at 155, obviously winning the title at against Eddie Alvarez and then losing to Khabib. But before that, he fought Nate Diaz twice at 170. He fought Cowboy at 170. I think he doesn't want to cut weight anymore. You remember watching him fight at 145, he looked like Skeletor on the weight scales. He likes drinking his whiskey. He likes showing up in the gym, and he likes fighting.
Yeah, I was about to say, man, I'm not sure. I think this fight is at lightweight, though.
No, it's at 170.
Because what's the name has it at lightweight?
No, it's 100% at 170.
Okay.
They agreed at 170 for a long time ago and never moved it to 155. A lot of people wanted to move it to 155 because of the title implications. But it's at 170. And like I said, I've never seen Dustin come up that weight class. I don't see it. I think Conor's going to win, and it's not a disrespect to Dustin, but I think Conor's more well-rounded. Like with the kicks, he doesn't use the takedowns for offense. He uses them more to mix things up. Dustin just wants to box you nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Dustin has good wrestling. Like you said with Chandler, I haven't seen it in a while. So I think my pick is Conor. Who you got?
Man, Dustin Poirier all day, every day. I picked him the first time they fought. I'm gonna pick him the second time they fought. Reason why is because, one, like you said, they both have evolved. But I just think Dustin Poirier, man, he's just on another level now. I think he is. I mean, I really want to say, man, I think he's bigger than Conor. I mean, legit. If you look at them, I think he's thicker, more solid. I
think they're the same height, so.
Yeah, I think they could be. I think it could be the same height, but I think Dustin Poirier, I mean, he might walk around a little bit bigger, because I think the heck was it? I think Dan Hooker, I think, had said somewhere where I think when he fought Poirier, I think he asked the person how much did Poirier weigh that night. Like, when they weighed in, I think he was like 180 something that night. So I don't know. I don't think Conor's really that much bigger, but just due to the sizes, because I just think Poirier can take more damage. That's why I'm saying he's bigger. Plus, too, I mean, you're right. Who knows how the weight could affect Poirier if it is at 170? You know, hasn't fought at 170. But I don't know, man. I'm just picking Poirier. I just think it's his time. You know,
I will agree with you on that one. I remember running into Dustin back in 2012, 2013, 2012, when they were in Fairfax, Virginia, outside DC. Funny enough, it's the same card I met Eric Johnson on, and we started Art of MMA about a year later because of it. It started
Frankie
because
Edgar was the main event, right?
What's that?
I said Frankie Edgar was the main event, right?
No, it was Dustin and Korean Zombie. And funny enough, that card has had repercussions throughout my entire career. Alex Soto, who I'm like good friends with now, I didn't even realize it at the time. I remember him fighting on the card now, but he was on that card. It's when I met Cowboy Cerrone and Brittany Palmer. But Dustin was like, Eric had set up an interview for Dustin to come down to the lobby, get a couple words in. And while he was waiting for Dustin, that's when me and Eric first met up. And I was just happened to be there. I just moved back from Denver, and I was chatting it up with some of my former coworkers. And me and Eric struck up a conversation. Of course, Dustin comes down. They have like a little like 2-minute interview. It wasn't very long. And then Dustin went to go do his final workouts. But I fast forward, you talk about the weight, right? So I was about 200 pounds at the time. I'm about the same height as Dustin Poirier. And I would say after the fight, when he came through the lobby and I ran into him and I was like, keep your head up. You fought a hell of a fight, because of course he lost to Zombie by a submission, I believe.
Yep.
And Dustin's always wore his heart on his sleeve. He was crying. He was emotional for, he doesn't hide his emotions. He's never been somebody to hide his emotions. A lot of people call it soft. I just call it being real. I'll never bash him for that. I will say sometimes I feel like he could be a little more of a stone cold killer and less emotional. But, Dustin rides, highs and lows, right? But get back to my point was he was actually pretty much the same size as me. And I should have allegedly had like 50 pounds on him.
Yeah.
But he literally looked the same size as me, if not bigger than me. So you're talking about two guys same height. He fought a fight at 145 pounds that night. And I was a 200-pound person at the time. And you couldn't have told who was the bigger guy.
Yeah.
So I can see what you're saying about him walking around at a certain weight. And obviously back then they had the IVs and stuff. So people definitely ballooned up way more fight night than they did nowadays. But Conor doesn't cut weight for 170. That's one of the things that makes him great. So that's going to be a fun fight. And I think Conor's going to piece him up. And I think, we haven't seen Dustin stop since Khabib. But nobody really stops Dustin early anymore. He fights. He go through wars to get to you. But Conor's different, man. Conor lands when you don't think he should land. And he hits you at different angles. He hasn't been the most active fighter the last few years. And I think that's the only thing holding him back. Because we just don't know. But when Conor's fighting, except for the name Khabib Nurmagomedov, and when Nate Diaz basically used his weight against him and laid on him the first time Conor ever fought at 170, you never seen Conor look bad in a single fight. Chad Mendes took him down a couple times, and then once they were on the feet, Chad Mendes got put to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
If Dustin doesn't try to take him down, and Dustin tries to stay on his feet with Conor McGregor, as good as Dustin's boxing is, like I said, Conor does it from different angles. He doesn't come at you like a boxer. He fights you at angles, and that's something you don't see in MMA, and that's something that has made him successful. So it's going to be fun. You got Poirier. I got Conor. Before we get out of here, let's pick a couple more fights on that card to talk about. I will go first this time because I know you're going to take my fight again. Though, actually, probably not this time. There's a lot of women's fights on this card. You might actually go for it.
You know what it is. I already know who I'm picking. I already know which fight.
Mine's actually more of a personal pick. It's talking about that same hotel, same fight night, 2012. Brad Tavares. Nicest guy in the world. So cool to chill and talk with. We didn't even talk about fighting. I think we were talking about football or something else. I think the Super Bowl had just happened or something like that. We were just chilling. He's fighting Antonio Carlos Jr., another guy that people love. Man, that fight's going to be fun. I see it going 3 rounds to a decision. I think Brad Tavares has got enough to take it. I think he's the more physical fighter. I think Carlos is going to try to grapple with him. But Tavares is pretty good at staying on his feet against grapplers. He doesn't get taken down easily at all. And if Carlos Jr. can't get it to the ground, I think Tavares wins that fight. You think anything different?
Yeah, man. I actually was looking at that fight earlier. I think Carlos Jr. is the better fighter, just hands down. I like Tavares too, but I just think Carlos Jr. I think Shoeface, that's his nickname. Yeah, I think it's his fight to lose.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be fun though. I just think it's gonna be a real fun fight. Normally when Brad loses, it's either decision or knockout. Never been submitted. When Carlos wins, it's either submission or decision. So something's got to give, right?
Yeah.
What other fight you looking at on that card?
Man, I got to pick my girl JoJo Calderwood, man. Picking her to win. I'm picking Action Man to stop Jessica Eye. I'm thinking she's gonna stop her straight up. Like I'm waiting for the doctor, the freaking Dr. Neville to show up, man. The Joanne Calderwood that I used to watch in freaking Invicta to show up, man, and just straight put on the show and just starch Jessica Eye. I just think she's the better striker. Like, that's really what Jessica strikes as well. But I think Joanne Calderwood's the better striker. Joanne Calderwood does have submission skills if she does get taken down. So I think it's JoJo's fight.
It's funny because, well, for one, I disagree. I'm taking Jessica Eye in that fight. So we've had so many disagreements on these picks that our prediction totals are probably gonna be like tied again next week. I think Jessica Eye is just a better all-around fighter. I think Calderon has looked good sometimes, especially when she came off Tough. You know, she was definitely like probably the best fighter on Tough that year. But she looked good in the last fight. She hasn't really looked like overall. I think Jessica Eye has got a lot of power for that division. And I think she's technical. She's good with her striking. I don't think Calderon can match her on her feet. So we'll see if Calderon takes her down. But I think Jessica Eye is going to win that fight. I'm actually surprised you didn't pick the Rivas-Rodriguez fight, though.
Nah, because I've always been a fan of Joanna Calderwood. She's been my favorite. I want to say she probably is my favorite female fighter. Like, I've been such a.
We're not going to spend any more time making picks on this card. We're going to let everybody get out of here. We kind of ran a little bit long after having a short episode last week. But I think this card is stacked. Like, for everything that, and you know, we kind of sleep on these cards, like tomorrow's card, UFC Fight Island 8, Chiesa and Magny. We kind of sleep on cards like that, right? Because they're like, oh, they don't have a lot of name value. And they end up being some of the best cards we ever watched because there's knockouts and there's all kinds of cool stuff. UFC 257 is stacked from top to bottom. I can honestly look and see right now, looking at the card, there's only like 2 fights I don't care about, maybe 3. But that's talking out of 12 fights. From Conor and Dustin, Chandler and Hooker. We just talked about Eye and Calderon. Just talked about Rodriguez and Ribas. I love Amanda Ribas. I think she's fun. I think she's energetic. I think it's going to be a very fun fight. Azadar is undefeated. He's going against Frevola. That could be a fun fight. I'm not overly interested in that fight, but it could be interesting. Tavares and Carlos Jr. we talked about. Sarah McMahon is back. She's fighting Juliana Pena. Pena, of course, coming off that tough loss to Randami not too long ago. Back when we did episode 3, Ladies Night, the Holly Holm card. Nick Lentz is back. Not really concerned too much about the Hack Perez Sarukian fight. But, you know, like I said, sometimes the cards you don't really know. Murdov's always been super tough. He's going against Andrew Sanchez. Khalil Roundtree's back going against Prachnio. And the last fight is Amir Abazi versus Zumagulov. I don't know much about either one of those guys. But that's why we watch the cards to see who's next on deck sometimes. So, ladies and gentlemen, a couple quick things before we get out of here. Been a minute. Make sure you like and subscribe. Show us some love. Leave a comment. If you disagree with us, let us know. You got some picks of your own. Make sure you drop a comment. Tell us who you think's going to win this week. And we'll sit there and make sure we respond to everybody. Other than that, you guys have a great fight week. We'll look forward to seeing these 2 cards. We'll get back with you next week, Brandon and I. And you never know who might show up. So we'll see if we can get some special guests down the road. I know we did a good job of doing that in the past. 2021, we've been kind of focused on Brandon and I getting back on track after everything happened. As always, our thoughts and prayers are with the DaSilva family. That hasn't gone anywhere. It's always fresh on our minds. So thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. This has been Art of MMA. For Brandon and myself, have a good one.